All right, so today we're going to be talking about grounding and how it applies to dance and where it comes from and how it applies in different dances, especially if you find it easy in one dance but struggling in another. We'll talk about how to deal with that. I want to start by just giving you a background of why I decided to talk about this. I actually got a message from someone that said, I'm totally practicing to apply how to be grounded in my social dancing, and sometimes with more and sometimes with less success, right? And he says, it's pretty tricky trying to apply it in all the dances I'm dancing socially. The connection points and the dynamics used in Lindy are different to those in Balboa, Shag, or blues, and very different to those in salsa, bachata, kizomba, ballroom, etc. So I have to be careful not to get frustrated that your concept being the grounding, right, works well in Lindy, but not as good in salsa. And so I'm going to talk about why that might be the case, that it works well in Lindy, but not in salsa. But realize this is his experience. Some of you, depending on what scene you're in, you might find that it actually doesn't work that well in your scene because of similar things. And I think to say it doesn't work well is maybe not the accurate word, but you have less time to play with it, might be a more accurate way to say it. So you have to be even more accurate and precise when you're dancing in certain dances and certain scenes with certain dancers. I'd say probably the best way to think of it is with certain dancers, you need to be very precise. With other dancers, you have a little bit more leeway to mess up. And so, but before we get into the specifics on it, I want to just go over what is grounding, what are we talking about, so those of you that maybe haven't taken the grounding lesson can catch up and understand what we're talking about. So the concept of grounding, and you can look at it in a couple different ways. You can look at it as grounding yourself, right? And I think of it grounding myself to the ground, right? Which, if I think about this object, it's grounded when I press against it and it doesn't move anywhere. It's got some amount of grounding, right? Now, if I move it, clearly it's not as grounded anymore as it was before it was moving, right? And if you think about something that like this tabletop right here, this is a counter, right? No matter how hard I press against this counter, it is staying exactly where it is. Same as the walls in this house. No matter how hard I press against them, they are grounded, right? They are firmly connected to the ground. That's what grounding means for me, right? Different people might have different meanings for it, but for me, it means how connected are you to the ground? And so that's how, when you feel other things, you press against them, and whether they move or not, or how hard it is to move them, is usually an implication of how grounded they are. Just like your dance partner, when you press up against them, there's a certain amount of pressure that it requires to get them to move. Although some people will move really like it's like a feather. You touch them and boom, they're off, right? And then other people, it's more like a refrigerator. You've got to really push into it to get them to move. And then some people, what's the word? Some people even move before you even touch them, right? They have that anticipation going where you're about to touch them and they're going, right? So this is them, this is you, you go, and they're like, woo, right? So there's different amounts of grounding people have. And all of them are great. Like, they're all great for different reasons in different situations. So really what we're trying to figure out is, how do we use the concept of grounding to improve our dancing, right? Both as a lead and as a follow. Now, right now, when we're talking about moving things, you might be thinking as a lead. Grounding is more, oh, that's how I move as a lead, or, how I judge my partner to push them is like, I can learn how much grounding they have and then react to it by pressing hard enough to move them, or not pressing hard enough so they don't move, right? If I don't press, say it takes 5 pounds of pressure to move them. If I only press 2 pounds of pressure, I know they're not going to move, right? So that's good knowledge for me to have as a lead, right? And if I press 10 pounds of pressure, I know they're gonna move. In fact, I know if I press 5.5 pounds of pressure, they're gonna move. So I don't need to press 10. 10 is excessive, right? I can just go with 5.5 or 5.1 and get them to move. So if I want to be efficient with my dancing and spend less energy, I'm just going to go above the amount I need them to move. But you don't, that's another thing, you might not always want to be efficient. And as dancers, we can also change the amount of grounding we want from our partner, right? That's maybe something we can get into later. I don't know that we need to get into it right now, but as a lead, you can request your partner to be 5 pounds worth of pressure before moving, or 10 pounds or 20 pounds, lighter or heavier, basically. But as a follow, I also want you to recognize it's the same, like you want to know your own grounding, and leads, you want to know this too, but it's more obvious for follows, I think, why you want to know your own grounding, right, is because it affects the lead. So if you're super light, and you know that, that's affecting the lead one way. If you're super heavy, that's affecting the lead another way. So you want to understand your own grounding. And the way to figure that out is actually, like, and most of us have a natural amount of grounding that we already dance with, both leads and follows, but you can change it up. And the way to change it up is basically take something. I recommend taking the countertop, something that does not move, a wall, something like that. And I recommend pressing against it, like just a little bit, you know, just like 1 pound of pressure. And then without moving your body, like I want you to press 5 pounds of pressure. The only thing you're moving basically is your arm going into the wall, but really it's not moving because the wall doesn't move. So the amount of moves might be like this tiny bit, the amount that your finger squishes, right? So you can see, like right now my fingers are touching, but they're not pressed hard. And as I move them together, they squish a little, so they move a little, but they're not gonna move beyond like my bone structure, right? So as I'm pressing, I might have 1 pound of pressure and there's a small skin squish. And then if I press the 10 pounds of pressure, I've got like full skin squish, and I can go to 20 or 50 pounds of pressure and it doesn't really squish much more. But I'm feeling that grounding, right? In the grounding, here's the weird thing though. A lot of people think the grounding is the pressure I'm feeling in my hand. No, that's not it. The grounding is the pressure I feel in my feet that keeps my body from moving anywhere, right? So there's a way to cheat this where you might not feel the pressure in your feet. And that's if when you're pressing, you actually lean in, right? If I lean in, then the amount of pressure in my feet is not really equivalent to the pressure in my hand. There might still be some, but it's not as much. Whereas if I stay on my own balance and I don't lean in, right, and then I push, but I also don't go away when I push, right? I stay right where I am. The only way to do that is to ground myself by connecting my body to the floor, right? I've got to connect my legs to the floor, my body to the floor. I've got to connect basically every single muscle from the foot that's standing on the floor all the way up to the arm that's connected to the wall, right? So a couple ways to check your grounding and to test your grounding and to really feel like, oh, I understand what I'm looking for, right? It's not the pressure in the hands, although that can be important and valuable to understand as well. It's the pressure in the feet that you feel before you move. So try standing on one leg is a good way to do it. And once you're standing on one leg, then without leaning in, remember, without leaning in, you're going to start pressing against a wall or a counter or something, and you're going to start feeling, one of two things is going to happen when you do that. Either your body is going to go out, right, or you're going to start to feel pressure build in your leg muscles, in your body, in your stomach, and everything, in your arm, everywhere, going to avoid moving, right? And if you miss a spot, let's say like I don't put the pressure in my leg. I have pressure in my upper body, I have pressure in my arm, but I don't have pressure in the leg. What's going to happen is this, right? And you're going to move. But you'll move with a really solid like movement. You'll move. I actually showed that wrong. I fell a little. You won't fall. If you do it, you'll move like that, right? If you have pressure everywhere but the foot, you'll move. If you have pressure in the foot, but let's say you don't have pressure in your upper body, you're going to get that motion, right? And because basically you disconnected, you got the pressure here to block this from moving, your hip from moving, but then you didn't connect your upper body, your chest, right? So you got to connect that. And when you get all of it, you're going to stay exactly where you are. And then when you release, you're going to still be in the exact same spot, no moving sideways or anything. You're right there. That's how you check your own grounding, right? And now you can do this when we dance. We can be grounded even when we're in a counterbalanced position, right? So some dances you lean in as you dance, right? Like some tango dancers do this. Even in Lindy Hop, when we come in for a sugar push, we might go boom, and then we might lean into it and come away from it. Really depends on your style, whether you're using counterbalance or not. And even in counterbalance, it's the same concept, but you would start, let's say you're in counterbalance, and now there's a certain amount already of pressure in the feet, like a little bit of friction. But now I want you to build pressure in your arm and press against it and feel how your feet have to hold a little bit more pressure and your stomach has to hold a lot more pressure actually in this position to get that feeling. And I hope you're doing this with me as we go. I mean, some of you are driving or doing something, working or something, that's fine if you can't do it. But if you can, if you have the space, go ahead and lean up against the wall or a counter and lean into it and then press. But remember, nothing's moving when you press. You don't get that, you don't get this, no, and you also don't get, well, now if you were to let go, you would fall in. But ideally when you're pressing, you're not falling in more. You're staying exactly where you are and just pressing as hard as you can against that wall. And the reason why I'm asking you to press as hard as you can is because I really want you to feel the amount of grounding that can happen in dance and what it feels like in those leg muscles. Because usually we dance, a lot of people dance with such a light amount of grounding, almost no grounding, right? And so if you do it so light, you're not going to notice the feeling. It's going to be hard to feel in the first place. And you're not going to be actually choosing it or not choosing it if you're not aware of it, right? So first we just get aware of it by increasing. It's kind of like if I were to pick up a 100-pound bar, right? Like I'm like, whoa, that's heavy. I can really feel all my muscles working to pick up that bar. Whereas if I pick up a feather, technically I still have to use all the same muscles, maybe not the same muscles, but I have to use a bunch of muscles to pick up a feather, right? Technically, probably all the same muscles. If I pick it up in the exact same way as I pick up the bar, then I have to use all the exact same muscles, but I'm not going to feel those muscles working. So I start by really feeling all the pressure so that I can feel. And then as you get really, I don't want to say better, but as you get more experienced in your grounding, you can change your grounding up and you can choose different levels of grounding so that you feel like a feather, but you're still grounded. Or you feel like somewhere in between, maybe a chair, or maybe you want to feel like a refrigerator or something really heavy, right? Because maybe the song feels really heavy. So, and I'm talking about follows right now, but leads, we should be doing the same thing, because we also, when we lead, we can lead from a space of groundedness or a space of not grounded. And a space of grounded lead is really powerful. It's basically when you talk about full body leading, people say, oh, lead with your body. Really, I think what they mean is like you got to be grounded when you lead. You don't have to, but in order to have a full body lead, in order to lead actually from your feet as well as from the rest of your body, you need to connect it all up, use all the muscles that connect the body to then move it. So if I want to move something, before I move it, when I press into it, let's say I have two ways of doing this, right? I can press into it and keep my body right where it is and get the connection and have all that connection, and then use that connection and use my legs to move it, right? And if I use my legs, one of two things is going to happen. Either I'm not going to move at all, right? Or I'm going to move toward it if I'm using 100% of my legs. You can also balance things, right? And use your legs some, but also move yourself back, right? But you're gonna feel the pressure in your legs just like you would when you're pressing and not moving, right? If you press against a wall and you press, there's some form of pressure that you feel. So even when you're doing like a rock step where you're moving backward, you feel a little bit of that pressure in your legs so that you know you're using your whole body to lead the partner. But a lot of people do different things where like they just kind of lean into it. And yeah, they're using upper body, but they're not using their whole body to lead the partner, right? So they accidentally fell into it. And again, it's different than moving into it, like falling into it, whatever you want to call it, moving into it, and then moving the partner using your grounding versus just falling in to lead, or just pushing your partner without really using much connection on the floor. Again, not that there's anything wrong with those things, they're just not grounding. What we're talking about, where you're skipping the step, where maybe you're having very zero grounding or very light grounding, like 1 pound of pressure or something like that. I'm seeing Andy say, if I use this exercise in class, I'd prefer to have the students connect with a partner instead of a wall. Is there any downside to using a partner instead, or will the drill work the same? I would say there is a downside, yes, to using a partner, and that's that your partner is not necessarily going to stay right where they are, right? So your partner and they fluctuate. So when you press against someone and you really press against them, their hand presses back against you, it's going to do this kind of thing, right? And so I usually start with a wall and then move to a partner after I get people to feel what it's like to have perfect, right? When I say perfect, I mean literally that wall is not moving, it is staying right there for me so that I don't have to worry about it. If I take a partner into play, then I have to adjust for their I don't know that imperfection is the right word, but their inconsistency, right? I have to adjust for their inconsistent movement so that their hand is not always right in the exact same spot. It's not always giving exactly 5 pounds of pressure or exactly what I'm giving it. Sometimes it's giving me less, sometimes it's giving me more, right? Now, I do want them to transition into a partner, but I want them to start by feeling something where they know what their end goal is, right? And when you press against a wall or something that doesn't move, it's really clear. You can feel in your own body exactly what you're looking for, and then go to a partner and go, okay, let's try to recreate that feeling with our partner. So no matter whether you're a lead or a follow, I do want you practicing both the ability to move something else, right? Like pressing into something and feeling how much pressure it requires to move it, and pick different objects. Like this glass on a table, right, has a certain amount of pressure that I press against it and it doesn't move. It's really light, but it's there, right? And I want to feel the pressure in my feet as I press against it. That's what I'm looking for, is how much pressure is in the feet when I press against that versus when I press against the chair, right? Because when I press against the chair, let's say I want to do a rock step, I want to send us both backwards, right? Then if I'm pressing against the chair, I'm going to need to use more grounding in my feet if I want us both to go the same distance than if I want the glass and myself to go the same distance. If I have a light object, I want to press less in my feet. Maybe the same amount here, right? There might still be a certain amount of pressure here, but my feet resist less so that our movements get the same distance. Assuming I want us to get the same distance. If I don't, if I want only that to move, then my feet ground even more. They try to go to 100% so that I can move the object. Let's see. So we've covered how leads and follows both can understand their own pressure, right? Understanding how much pressure you're using to move something, right? Or to be moved, right? as well as someone else's pressure, how to feel, oh, this is how much someone else is requiring to move or to be moved. Yeah, that was right. So now I want to go into, okay, so what about when we do a different dance? Like, you know, we're talking, why is it easier in Lindy Hop and harder in salsa, at least for him? And so this is what I think. When you're doing salsa, being grounded might feel a little more tricky because there's what we call impulse leads in a lot of salsa dancers. Probably not all of them, but in general, when you dance salsa, there tends to be what I call an impulse lead. And by the way, this also is true in certain Lindy Hop scenes. In certain Lindy Hop scenes, they have impulse leads versus let's call it continuous leads, or long leads would be another thing. There's kind of maybe 3 different ways of looking at it. You have impulse lead, continuous lead, and in the middle is a long lead, right? So impulse lead is basically this. It's when you take something and, like, I mean, the quickest impulse I could say would be like that, right? Basically, I touch and I bled. As soon as I touch, I lead. Most things don't have that quick of an impulse. Every once in a while it does. Most of the time it's more like the thing goes and it connects on one end, like, so it connects and it stops and then it leads, right? So there's actually some momentum that stops it and then leads it. But it's still really quick. In Lindy Hop, like a rock step, we're both going away from each other and then we connect and release. And like, it can just be this, like, literally connect and release, and then it's relaxed. There's no lead anymore. Or you can have a long continuous lead where it can be connect, and then instead of relaxing, you keep the connection as you go through the movement, right? So you can do a whole swing out or a whole movement without losing the connection. But that's the same in salsa. If you wanted, you could have salsa where you had the whole time, you had a pull connection as you were going step, step, boom, step, step, boom. You could have a pull connection the whole time. The only weird part about that is that you would, in order for it to work with physics, you would need to be in counterbalance with each other for it to make sense. Because if you think about it, if I have a pull connection, this is a pull connection on something, right, versus a push, right? If I have a pull connection, then I can move it this way, but I can't move it the other way with a pull connection unless it's in counterbalance with me, right? Now it's countered me, so now if I move it that way, see how it's going that way? And I can also move it this way with the pull connection. So when it's balanced away from me and I have a pull connection, I can lead it either direction with that pull. So in salsa, if you had a little bit of a sit back, right, as you were connecting, and you do and they had to sit back as they were following, then it could work. Or you could also lean back a little bit, right? But most people don't dance it that way. Most people dance it more upright, right? Now you could have a push connection the whole time with someone if you leaned in a little bit with them, right? Boom, bop, boom. And you could keep that push connection the whole time, right? Because with a push connection, if you're leaning in, you can push them that way, and you can let them come back the other way just by releasing a little, right? If they're in counterbalance. If you're not in counterbalance, the push connection is only going to allow you to move them that way. The other way is going to have to happen from some other thing other than physics, right? Like, it could happen from different techniques of dance. Some people follow the connection and they try to keep the connection the whole time. Some people go with a visual connection as a lead. But if you want that physical connection, you need them to lean into you. So with salsa, you'd have to actually dance it a little bit leaned in if you wanted to keep that connection. But most likely what you're going to do is you're going to switch between connections. So you're going to have a pull connection at one end when you're sending them, when you're catching them on the rock step or on the forward step for the lead, right? And then when you bring them back, you've got that pull, but then it's going to switch to a push when you do the back step. And then it's going to go push forward and switch to a pull. And if you have impulse leads, it's going to be like connect, release, like right at the edges. It'll be, dink. There'll be these little dink feelings But that's the same in not every dance, but in different people have that connection where they just connect at the edges of the movements, which means it's less time for you to practice really honing in on that grounding and all that stuff. You have to be almost instantaneous with it. So that's why it feels harder, but doesn't mean it's impossible. It just means it's a more advanced skill to learn. I'm going to jump in and answer a question. Andy asked, I like to follow drills with an actual move which uses the skill which has been drilled. Is there any specific move which you'd recommend as demonstrating grounding, or would just an ordinary swing out serve? FYI, we're working on Fast Lindy right now, which requires responsiveness. Yeah. And grounding. A ton of grounding, because the faster you move, the more you need to use like your whole body to lead your partner, right? Because now they're moving. So it requires grounding and responsiveness built together the faster you move. But yeah, unless you're just running around each other, you're gonna need to use your body and the grounding to then move the partner the other way, or it'll be a lot easier if you're using it. But yeah, are there specific moves? I mean, I think in Lindy Hop, a swing out is a great move that shows grounding because we really can spin connection through the whole move without releasing the grounding, right? That said, it's not like you need to have grounding to do a swing out. Well, I mean, you need some, but you could get away with doing a swing out by having grounding just at the edges, right? And even then you could have very little amounts. So like, if you really wanted to pick a move that absolutely required it, I mean, that's the thing with the topic like grounding, almost nothing requires it to get done. It's just a matter of like the way that you move has to change based on how your partner grounds, right? So that's the thing. So like, so if my partner is super light, right, then as a swing out, when I do my swing out, I need to be super light in my grounding so that when I go through the swing out, like I'm not overpowering. She doesn't come in too quickly. She doesn't come in too slow. All those things. Most likely she's going to come in too quickly if I overpower her, if she's really light. Right? And so it's more about like connecting it to your partner. So I don't know that there's any one move that works best. I do like a circle. A circle like is a move where you have connection in the whole arm and the back and you're going around, right? So you're definitely gonna feel it more. You have more opportunity to feel it in a circle than in a swing out. That said, I would say like, I would want them to learn it in all their moves, but yeah, if you need to pick a move to start with, I would start with a circle. Basically anything that has connection for an extended period of time, that has to have connection for an extended period of time. A swing out can have that connection on the 1 and then release, connection on the 4 and then release. Whereas a circle, you gotta have that connection all the way through it. Awesome, thanks for the FYI, Andy. I did switch things on my side as well, so I think that might have been part of it. Let's see, and those of you that I don't know that are listening in, she just said that the visual is clearer and audio is more consistent in this call compared to the last one. Okay, so let's move on. The other thing I was going to point out, so the thing I was trying to point out there is in salsa, in certain dance, I don't want to say salsa because it's really with certain partners, and in certain scenes there's a lot of partners that have that, but really it's not dance related, it's partner related. You are going to notice impulse leads, which means the grounding goes by much quicker, so you have less time to focus on it, right? And the other thing is that some dancers are going to tend to fly through the moves without much grounding. So they're going to do it with very little grounding, which also makes it harder for you to feel. Just like when we were talking about picking up a 100-pound weight versus a feather, you can feel the muscles and practice using those muscles a lot more with the 100-pound weight than with the feather. So some dancers are going to fly through it and not really give you the chance to be grounded. That said, here's my tips when you're in those situations. The first tip I would say is to focus on the feeling of grounding in your feet, right? And how it connects from your feet to your chest. So in other words, like if I just think about a salsa step, when I take a step like this, boom, and go back, or a rock step in Lindy Hop, right? Any step, it doesn't matter. When my foot hits the floor, there's a certain amount of grounding I have to do, like if I'm without my partner, just to stop my own body from going backward, right? If I don't, I would just continue to go backwards. So there's something that has to happen in my feet all the way up through my chest for it to stop, right? Now watch, if I do the pressure in my feet, but not in my upper body, and not in my chest, this is what's gonna happen. It's gonna go. You see that? So I stopped it with my feet, but my upper back, right? Whereas if I use it all at the same time, then my upper body stays whatever position I'm in. Say I'm in this position, as I move back and I hit that and everything tightens up, everything stops. So I can feel the pressure. Maybe I don't feel the pressure with my partner, but I can feel it all the way through my own body. And if I do that, I can feel I lost it a little, right? Same thing if I'm moving forward. If I'm moving forward and I don't stop my upper body, I just stop my leg, we're gonna get that motion. So it's gonna be like, whereas if I really stop it, it's all gonna stop at the same time, boom, and I can go back. So it's boom, right? So whatever move, if you're doing Charleston, same thing, boom. When you stop, when you want your body to stop, it's gotta connect up to your leg. Everything. Otherwise, you get these little like delays. And if you want that, that's cool, right? If you want this like feeling of like, right? That might be something that you add in as a stylistic thing or musicality thing. But if you're always doing that without thinking, without realizing it, then it's not style. It's just a habit, right? Oh, thank you, Andy. She asked, did I complete my thoughts on types of leads? I talked about impulse leads versus continuous leads, but I didn't really explain long leads. So yeah, long leads is just in between. So if an impulse lead happens in like 0.1 seconds and a continuous lead just stays there for the whole time, then a long lead is one that happens longer than 0.1 seconds, but not forever. So if we look at like a rock step to bring our partner in, right? If I rock, pull, and I keep that pull going, it stays continuous, right? But maybe I go rock, pull, and then relax. So like at some point, maybe when my elbow gets here, I start relaxing. And so it's longer than an impulse lead might be like rock, release, right? And so at that moment, as soon as I start to come back, I've let go. Continuous, I keep the connection all the way through, and long is somewhere in between where I'm pulling longer than just impulse, but maybe not all the way holding it the whole time. So that's what I think of as a long lead. I personally prefer long leads over impulse leads because they tend to be more clear, right? You're giving someone more time. An impulse lead is just like, here, go, figure it out. A long lead tends to be like, here's exactly what I want. I'm gonna give you, you know, it's probably only 1 second that you're actually giving them. Maybe not even that. Maybe you're only giving them 0.5 seconds to get it, but it's a lot more than 0.1 seconds. So you're basically like giving them longer to understand what your lead is. If we're talking about like one example might be, I'm just walking someone in that direction. I want them to walk with me, right? Some people will go, boom, impulse lead and walk. and they'll be done leading at that moment, right? There's no more lead. It's just boom, and let's go together, and the person goes. Other people will go, hey, let's go together. All right, okay, now we got it, and then they let go. And once they can clearly see that people are connected up, going at the same rate, then they let go. And other people just keep it the whole time, continuous. All right, so let's jump back. So now we were talking about some dancers play through it. So focus on your connection to from your feet to your chest is the next thing I was saying. You want to connect that foot to the chest, or really whatever's touching the ground, connected to as close to the connection as possible of your partner, right? So the arms, like ideally you would connect the feet all the way to the fingertips and feel your partner with that movement, right? So let's say I had a pull connection and I want to move my partner. So I'm going to feel that resistance all the way through the floor, up into my chest as I go to take this step. Even before I move, when I take that step, watch, there's 2 ways to take, or there's probably 3 ways to take this step. One way would be to press in the legs, but not press in the body, which in case takes the legs back, but it kind of leaves my upper body behind, and my upper body only goes after I get to the point where it's like my body can't go any further, it's going to fall down, right? So it's like pulling it. So that's one way. Then the other way would be to connect it all up, and as you move, that other stuff goes with it, right? And then the last way would be to move your upper body before, right? So you get almost sort of like you're falling into your step, right? And again, all of these can be played with and used. I recommend doing the one where everything goes together so that you feel what it's like to use your body, because then when you do something like this, even if you do this, you can still use your body. You can go to here and then use your body to move to get everything. So you can have that styling difference of different angles or something, but then you use your whole body to move it and it stays. Versus if you went like this and you didn't use your whole body and you had a connection, you would end up going back into some other connection rather than really staying in that position as you want to stay in that position, or that style of whatever it is that you want to do. So same if we're leaning in, same thing. I want to feel that pressure go all the way through my legs into my chest, and if I can, all the way into my partner. But if they're really light and they're not connecting, then I'm going to just not worry about feeling it in my arms and try to feel it more in my chest. Yeah, and so the reason why I like that is because even if your partner doesn't dance with much grounding, you can always practice your own grounding in those areas and really feel your own body moving together. And the other thing is you'll probably notice it most when you're changing directions. So in other words, when I'm going forward, once I'm going forward, I'm not going to necessarily notice it as much as when I stop going forward and I go backward. And then I'm going to feel all those muscles build to stop my body and go backward, boom. And then when I'm going backward, same thing. I'm going to feel it most when I stop to go forward, right? And at some point, you're going to notice it no matter what. If you're going and you stop going forward and you do this, you're just going to notice it in a weird position, right? But at some point, you have to ground yourself in order to stop your momentum. Yeah, and then in advanced thing, you also will notice it. Once you get good at this, you'll start to notice it every single time you put your foot down. Like as I'm walking, I'm using that power to take that next step. Every step of the way, I'm using a little bit of grounding, of that pressure in the floor and pushing off of it to move myself, right? Or to stop myself from moving. But every time that foot goes onto the floor, it's either being used to move or to stop myself from moving, which is what grounding is really all about. Grounding is really about using the floor to move your body so that you're using your whole body, right? Or using the floor to stop your body from going, right? Then the next thing I said was, I want you to focus on grounding between you and your partner only during the impulse lead moment when you change direction. So if you're dancing with a partner that has these impulse leads, then the only time, another way to practice your grounding is to only think about it at those impulse lead moments, right? When you're about to change directions, boom, think about it and then relax and don't worry about it until next time you come back again, which, by the way, still happens a ton in the dance, right? If you think about even in salsa, like it's happening twice every 8 counts, right? It's like boom, there, 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 right? So within 5 seconds, I did it like 4 times, right? So it's still happening a lot. It's just not happening for 5 whole seconds. It's happening for like impulse moments during those 5 seconds. Let's see. And then the other tip I'd have is to actually focus on dancing without grounding between you and your partner while still having it in your body, which is what I mentioned like just a few seconds ago, or not seconds, but when I first gave you the tip of like recognizing it from your feet to your stomach. But I think it's still important to recognize, like when you're dancing with a partner, you can have grounding with yourself and choose not to have it between the partners, or let's say have very little between the partners, right? Or maybe even a negative amount. If they're anticipating, they're actually moving before they even hit you. So you're coming together and before they even hit, they go the other way. Then like it's like having a negative counter or a negative number as a grounding, right? But it's still some form of grounding. It's just a negative or a 0 or a positive number. And I say that meaning 1 pound of pressure, 0 pounds of pressure, negative 1 pound of pressure, right? Like it takes even less than a pound of pressure, even less than 0 to get them going. None of those are necessarily bad or wrong. It's just about recognizing what your partner does so you can adjust to them, right? And same as a follow, you want to be looking for how your lead leads. Does he lead with a lot of pressure? Then you might want to give him back that pressure. Or does he lead with a light amount and you want to like move more lightly with the dance, right? And when it comes to leads, a lot of leads are just doing whatever they randomly do. And so as an advanced follow, I'd say you can pick and choose what you want, right? You can be like, well, he's not really clear on whether he wants to be heavy or light, so I'm going to be heavy or I'm going to be light. And you can choose that. If your lead is really more advanced than you in this concept of grounding, then I would try to let him choose and let him pick and try to adjust more to him, right? Basically, and I shouldn't say him, the lead. Basically, whoever is more advanced in a topic is usually going to be the one choosing how that topic it goes, right? Because they're the one with more skill at adjusting and making it work, right? So that's my suggestion, is like use it as something, either be like, okay, I know what I'm doing here. I'm going to give you the feeling that I want to give you, or let them have the feeling, you know. And it doesn't even need to be advanced, like whether you're more advanced than them or not. Sometimes you just change it up because you want to. Sometimes because injuries, you need to change things up to avoid injuries. There's all sorts of different reasons. So I just want you to have the ability to be more grounded or less grounded with your partner as a lead or as a follow, both in your own body and with them, and in your own body without them.